district offices. And the final decision was issued to accept it for exposure to cadmium. When they had the physician panel up on Part D, the physician panel said that cadmium, it will aggravate, contribute, or cause prostate cancer. In 2009, the International Library of Institute of Health and everything and Medicine, they also granted cadmium as it, and NIOSH just put it in their pocket guide, and that is it. Tommy Thompson, who was the Health and Human Service Secretary at the beginning of this program in 2000, stated before Congress, high doses of radiation will cause prostate cancer. DOE put in their slides that prostate cancer is part of it. Now the only way to get prostate cancer being paid is if it's already metastasized to the bone or to the urethra.
That is correct. Anyone who's getting a dose reconstruction from NIOSH at the Portsmouth plant, please write down POEF 150-96-0088. This was part of an investigation that I was part of for a short period of time, where the TLD badges were taken into a health physics department for reading. If the health physicist determined that the rating was too high because of his experience or knowledge of what her job classification was, there was a barcode on the wall that they wanted it zeroed out. And this document does state that. The frightening thing was we tried to blame them because they were people that came in with the nuclear navy. What we found out is, oh no, this practice was shown to us by the people from Goodyear. So any TLD readings that you might get if you're highly suspicious are probably inaccurate because the police officer was zeroed out. Many of them were because they thought police officers only worked in portals.
The also practice was across the sites was that if your badge went missing, they'd only give you 50% of what you would have had. The badges also would only collect certain neutrons or certain photons. They would only collect certain levels. And my issue is also that ionizing radiation is a toxic substance. So whether you have the 50% or not for Part B, underneath the regulations and statute, you qualify for Part E as a toxic substance exposure to ionizing radiation because it was more than a hunch and it's less than the preponderance of the evidence, so that means it's likely it's not. Everything that this toxic substance is aggravated, contributed to, or caused. Significant factor means any factor. And so the dose reconstruction, even though it does not give you Part B, should at least give you Part E.
I just want to piggyback on a little bit with this. When Lisa Calvin first brought this to my attention, a lot of times older men are told that prostate cancer is a very slow-growing cancer. And so you get PSAs taken every so often, and there's relatively little change. The situation that Lisa Calvin brought to my attention was where the change in PSA over a period of just a few months was typical of what men would have over a period of about 5 years. So in other words, something that might be 20 times as aggressive. And that gets your attention because a number of these people now are deceased because the disease progressed too far, it metastasized to other organs, and the next thing you know, you look at the newspaper and there's another obituary of somebody that you worked with. And that's got to get our attention because this appears to be a cluster. And so certainly medical surveillance is going to be needed so that we can work backwards and determine that in that era that there was something very unique going on and something that should be addressed and within the program.
Thanks a lot. I'm Dr. Laurie, and I've got a couple of issues that haven't been covered. One is kind of a form of question for this one here. When we worked in the shop, we been exposed, contaminated, unsafe conditions, our only recourse was to go to hospital. We had to go to DEEOIC, who in fact owned the facility, or the school facility, so a classic case of phosphorus. And they gave us there. Now we're in a situation where we're dealing with the Department of Labor. And when we do not, anytime that we get a final decision denial, who oversees or where do we go then?
Well, the answer to that is you can challenge a decision of the Department of Labor in federal court. It is not an easy road. The decision would need to be arbitrary and capricious. So there would have to be basically no support in the records for the decision that was made. Or a better situation, so if there's evidence on both sides and they choose against you, there's really no remedy for that. Now, if they make a decision based on a mistake of law, based on bad evidence, not, in other words, they don't just decide against you, but their decision makes no sense, or is based on clearly bad evidence. I'm trying to come up with a good example. We have a case where someone was diagnosed, someone had an operation back in 1979. The doctor went in, did exploratory surgery, and said, I believe that it's more likely cancer, but it could be diverticulitis, and I couldn't take a biopsy because the person was so sick. Now, we had 3 contract medical consultants write about this, and we had a doctor, an expert, say, I have no reason to doubt what the treating surgeon and the treating physician said, which is that it was more likely cancer than diverticulitis. And then we had contract medical consultants say, no, I believe it was diverticulitis. Our position was, it just doesn't make any sense. And they made mistakes in their reports. So that's the kind of case where you can say, Judge, they chose evidence that made no sense. It was based on a mistake. They characterized a biopsy done as diverticulosis, which is not diverticulitis. In any event, it's just an example. You have to say that they made such a huge error that there's no rational basis for the decision. And so these are the kinds of cases that you have to try and take to federal court. Now, Terry Berry, who was on the board, took her case to federal court, and they found her husband's case to federal court, and they found that the decision of the Department of Labor was arbitrary and capricious, and they sent it back with instructions. So that's what can be done, but it has to be a pretty serious divergence from what needs to be done.
If someone gets a final decision that says no, but they develop new evidence, new additional evidence that wasn't present in the previous claim, doesn't he or anyone else like him have to rectify a new claim with new evidence?
Absolutely. The claim never goes away, and so like we were talking about before, if you get to the end and you get a final decision and they say, well, you didn't put in proper medical evidence, you can go out and try and get proper medical evidence. When you get medical evidence, you submit it. Same thing with employment evidence. If you're able to develop employment evidence, it's a little more unusual to develop that good employment evidence. If you can't find it when you're working on your claim, it's tough to go out and develop it. But with medical evidence, go get it, have an expert write a letter, or anybody else for that matter.
Just real quick, just to stress on that new evidence, one thing we see a lot of times is with skin cancer, where a person will file a claim with 1 or 2 and it's any illness. If you get a new illness, yes, you can file a new claim.
Okay, the second issue had been discussed, if you don't mind. In 2000, when this Congress enacted this law, whatever, price of gas is $1.27 a gallon. Department of Labor claims examiners, I'm sure, made a certain wage. Today, the price of gas is $3.64. It's a 142% increase. I'm sure the Department of Labor people have gotten tremendous pay raises since then. At that time, Congress said an amount of money that had some value. That value has never been increased. It has not the same value, or even close to the same value today. And even if I was awarded a cancer claim, I guarantee that I'd crawl on my hands and knees and get the money back home. I got $150,000 in each month. In comparison, I guarantee you, there's not a single Department of Labor official who will go through that treatment for $150,000. And yet, that's what we do.
That's for sure. I do think that the answer there is that it needs to be legislated. And they certainly could have, instead of having a specific number, they could have tied it to some other number. They could have had a COLA, just like Social Security. They could have done that. They could still do it. But it's just a legislative issue. And so, call your congressman.
Yeah, there's another issue. When the compensation bill first came out, and I was in D.C., and they were listening to people testify, I wasn't able to. They tried to keep the media and things away from me. Anita George in Hyman said that 5 out of 6 women in her department had total hysterectomies. I also had a total hysterectomy, and her co-workers that I worked with. That they never addressed the women's issue in this bill. But yet our government pays the Marshall Islanders, the women, for their ovaries and all these things have been taken out, and they put a price on them. That they never compensated the women in this bill for their female problems, just like the prostate problems.
I'd like to also address with that, whenever the Department of Labor requested that the Independent Office of Medicine review the site exposure matrix, they brought up that issue. They brought up that ovarian cancer is caused by asbestos. Asbestos exposure causes ovarian, and that is nowhere in the film. So that's one thing that they suggested, is that somebody needs to be independent and overlook the site exposure matrix, find out what is their criteria of adding diseases and not adding diseases. Because it is well known across the world that, this would cause ovarian cancer. And it's accepted, just like the cadmium into the prostate. And now out in California, they did a study and tried correctly. And believe it or not, the 9/11 first responder bill, Dr. John Howard had added prostate cancer as one of the illnesses that they were exposed to something as a 9/11 first responders. And prostate cancer is a resumption cancer, already that. That's how come they're inconsistent across the board.
I have a list of the Marshall Islanders and how much they paid and what diseases they paid. They left quite a few of ours out. Our government, it's criminal act. I mean, what they've done in these facilities is criminal. And what it continues to do with the doctors and our medical records is still criminal.
And this is where we need everybody to have a voice, because they didn't like us speaking. They didn't want us to talk to each other. And that was supposed to be by a district director. And that we're talking too much to each other. And now that we are talking to each other, we're finding out, well, how come this one got paid for thyroid and that one didn't? How come that one got paid for hypertension and that one didn't? How come, this SEC cancer got accepted, but yet this SEC, which is still a SEC cancer, did not? How come this one got chronic brain disease and this one start enforcing the program as congressional intent. The congressional intent and the statute and the regulations that they implemented is there. But yet the policy, procedures, and internal memos and restrictive orders as done by the DEOIC is not there. And under 18 USC 1001, fraudulent statements and concealment of material facts is a criminal act. These case examiners are issuing fraudulent statements and concealing material facts when they do not review your file and do not address all of your employment. Do not address your memo.
Let me just say, I think we're here to collect complaints, and there are definitely lots of problems with this program. But this is a good program, and I think that there are those of us who feel like these problems are very serious, and but I have found, and we've been in contact with the people who run the program, and I find these people to be well-meaning people. I understand their problems, and there are bad apples, but we're in contact with the people who run the program. We make our arguments, they make theirs, and we make progress. So, well, there are big problems, but I think that there's, certainly from my point of view, I have a lot of success in the program, a lot of my people get paid, and they're happy. They're not thrilled. It's not a lot of money, but it helps a lot of people, and I do think it's a good program. And I just want to say that while we're here to collect complaints, we're here to make the program better. And I don't think that we're here to accuse people of being terrible people. This is about trying to make the program better and making sure that the rules are obeyed and that the people receive proper compensation. But with that, I think there was a hand.
Yes, sir. I'm the speaker for Power Improvement, my father. And I said earlier, we've had to get care here. I have a car that has 4 codes on it. 3 of them can be rated, 1 of them is related. How do I get the bills paid for this car? I presented to the nursing home he's in, which they scared the doctor. We're still paying all the bills out of the pocket. And I go to Mr. Gerlach is representing this right now. I go to the resource center for help, and they will talk to him because
yeah, well, I think Mr. Gerlach can help you with that. I think there are other people out there who will try and help, but ultimately we need to convince the providers to get signed up for the program. And once they do get signed up, they love it because the payouts are much better than Medicare or Medicaid. That's my understanding. But I think that you need to turn the bills in, and you need to just follow up. And I'm sure Mr. Garland can help with that. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to talk just a little bit about hearing loss and the Department of Labor's 10-year rule before 1970 as far as it relates to ototoxic exposure that are causing hearing problems. And certainly we had, of course, for the site, a lot of people that had 8 years, 9 years, 9.5 years. Some people went from an electrician to a maintenance mechanic, still had the 10 years. And the whole dilemma was, I had 5.5 years, okay? But the amount of trichloroethylene and styrene and albumin and some of the other toxins, the Department of Labor doesn't have the vaguest idea of the dose-related response, nor do they take dose into consideration. For example, where we worked, everybody was forced to huff trichloroethylene by the employer. We had to decrease in what today would be considered confined spaces, but yesteryear, when we were doing it between 70 and 80, it was not a confined space. So the amount of buildup of the trichloroethylene fumes would make us so drunk that we would just high. The management would tell us to go lay down. This is used in the hospitals as an anesthetic, as an anesthesia, and it's perfectly safe. But we had tremendous ramifications with the side effects. I'm talking about not hundreds of ppm for ethylene, but thousands. Research at Chicago, University of Chicago, shows that as little as 40 hours of exposure to rats, which have a very similar metabolic structure to us, shows that the hearing loss occurs. Now, I'll tell you this much. What we did, if you give me just a couple of minutes, I myself filed a claim for the hearing loss, and it took a couple of years to get it adjudicated, and finally got denied. But what we did is we contacted John Vance within the Department of Labor, and I said, how do we favorably adjudicate a hearing loss claim with less than 10 years of service? And he said, Mr. Sexton, there's 3 ways to do it. You can take the research that we did, all of our research, and you can review it. You can write an alternative interpretation, or you can show where ours was flawed. That was the first approach. Number 2 is you can show newer, better research that shows less than 10 years. And we did that with the Center for Disease Control and the National Institute of Occupational Safety, and the research that David Menuda and I spent hundreds of hours on. We went to Ohio State University Medical Library, Morgantown, West Virginia, up there, their medical library. Rachel Lighton and John Vance provided every single piece of research that the Department of Labor used to justify their 10-year rule. And essentially, from what David and I concluded, was that after we looked at all of the research, they essentially used, their primary research was on toluene, which is the least impacted as far as hearing loss goes. But we looked at all the research. We received information, a 300-page document from Dr. Masterson from the Center for Disease Control that showed significantly less than 10 years was sufficient to cause hearing loss. We even found the research that showed us which particular part of the ear was affected by each respective ototoxin. And in my final hearing, we showed that graph that trichloroethylene affected this piece, styrene affected this piece, toluene affected this respective part of the ear. And we think that the evidence that we provided was conclusive because it did a couple of things that the Department of Labor didn't do. One is they used some research that was 20 years old, 25 years old. So their toxicologist, Dr. Stokes, is probably not as up to snuff as what they may want to claim her to be, or the industrial hygienist that they have. But we felt like that we showed the newer research that provided better information. And then the third approach that John Vance told us to use was to have a medical professional, like a doctor, explain why medically that the dose response to a particular individual that perhaps didn't have 10 years was more impactful than to back it up medically as to why the hearing loss occurred. In myself, with the 5.5 years, every year I was working heavy concentrations of 2 chemicals. And every year that I went to the hearing test at the Plain Medical Facility, my hearing was getting worse. And it's noted on the files that I submitted that the hearing was degenerating rapidly, as shown as the exposure were occurred over the 5.5 years. So we think that with the research that we've done, I'd like to have David Menuda say a few words about the hearing loss. I think we probably spent 500 hours looking at all the research and gathering all the information and putting together such a strong case that if we went to federal court today, they would throw the 10-year rule out the window. David, would you like to say a few words on it?
Well, the first thing I would say is this is kind of one of my favorite issues. And Malcolm, we had a meeting with the folks that run the programs from the Department of Energy and Rachel Tom and some other folks from the Solicitors prosecutor's office, and we addressed this issue specifically. Since that time, I had a case where my claimant was there for 11 years, but in the middle, they had a strike, I think. It was about a month and a half. And so he doesn't have the 10 years. And they know that they get killed in federal court. There's no way that you can show scientifically that 10 years continuous is enough and 10 years with a month and a half vacation in the middle is not enough. There's no way. So I was kind of thinking, well, at least if we lose this one, we'll be able to take it to federal court, just like you said. In other words, their research is very weak on this issue. But I also think that it's a good example of John Vance is talking directly to you and Dr. Benuta. He's talking to Rachel. It's a pro. They're listening.